Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is the 1955 Egyptian epic Land of the Pharaohs, directed by Howard Hawks. This was the first Howard Hawks film that was pretty much a failure for various reasons. It was made for $2.9 million and only made $2.7 million. In perspective, The Ten Commandments was made for $13 million. This was a film that Hawks took a break from filmmaking for 4 years, went to Europe to travel, and came back and made Rio Bravo. Obviously I'm odd and I would much rather watch Land of the Pharaohs than Rio Bravo, but that's just me. There's a fair amount of leaps of faith you have to make with this film. The first one is probably Jack Hawkins as Pharaoh Khufu. You have Joan Collins as a Cypriot ambassador princess that becomes queen. You have James Robertson Justice playing James Robertson Justice. He plays an architect slave called Vashtar. The film is in blazing Technicolor. Joan Collins and Jack Hawkins are in a bit of brown face or just caked with makeup. The music is by Dmitry Tiomkin. The script was co-written by Nobel Prize winning writer William Faulkner. Martin Scorsese, I remember when this was introduced in the television, when I first saw it, Martin Scorsese did an introduction because Scorsese loves it. It's just a very odd, strange film. But I've always had a soft spot for it, and it is one of the few Howard Hawks films that, like I say, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a Blu-ray release, but it should, because of the blazing Technicolor. It claimed it had like thousands and thousands of extras. Obviously Hawks had made Hollywood classic after Hollywood classic. But this was a blip in his career. Nobody really wanted to see Jack Hawkins as a pharaoh. So the film itself is pretty schizophrenic. I will do a little bit of spoilers right at the end just in case you haven't seen it. Because it's understandable if you haven't, just because it's kind of been forgotten about. But you should have seen it if you're a Hawks fan. So, like I said, it's a little schizophrenic. It starts off with Jack Hawkins returning from another war, getting more and more treasure to put in his room full of treasure and gold, which he's obsessed about. There's a wonderful scene later in the film where he's explaining to his son the value of gold. He's got his son by his shoulders, and he ends up hurting his son because he's going on about how he wants to have as much gold as possible, and he's going to have this gold and it's his, and it'll always be his in the second life and the next life. And his son's like, you're hurting me. It's a wonderful little scene, and a kind of moment into the psychology of Pharaoh Khufu, who's just obsessed with having all this gold. Obviously doesn't do anything with it, he just has it in a room. It's about consumerism and capitalism, even in Egypt. So he's obsessed with when he dies and he's buried in his tomb in a pyramid, of all of his wealth, his treasure and gold being stolen. So again, there's another great scene about all these people with these models of pyramids, with fake passageways that hide the real passageway to the gold. And Jack Hawkins is like, I've seen it all before, fake passages, and you can all go away. I'm sick of all these ideas that I've seen. I want something that nobody's going to be able to steal my gold when I'm dead. So he tells of one of his conquests where there was like 3 paths to take to invade this village or town or whatever, and 2 were perilous, and the 3rd one was a wide open road. So obviously he sent part of his army down the wide open road, but then parts of the road fell away, parts of the road rose up, and he was so impressed with this that one of the prisoners that he has is the architect who actually created this, and he wants him to create a pyramid for him that nobody can steal his gold. So that's James Robertson Justice. He makes a deal with the Pharaoh that once the work is done, it's obviously going to take years to build a pyramid, but once the work is done, his people will be set free, but obviously because he knows the secret of the pyramid, he'll have to die when the Pharaoh dies. And we get an example of what will happen if he doesn't agree, because we see some soldiers who came back from the war that were disgraced in battle, and they get fed to a big pit of crocodiles. As you do, you've got to have a big pit of crocodiles kicking about your palace somewhere. So James Robertson Justice agrees, and the production of this pyramid goes on. It takes years. James Robertson Justice gets older. James Robertson Justice's son obviously grows up. So that's one part of the story, the kind of production of this wonder tomb. Again, I won't spoil the mechanism or the trick that is goes into the creation of this tomb, how it's built, how it will be impenetrable once Jack Hawkins' corpse and all his gold goes into the tomb. So the second part of the film is the introduction of Joan Collins' character. So there's a scene which is almost reminiscent of the scene in Flash Gordon where Ming the Merciless is getting tributes, especially from Identia, but that's a different story. So it's all these tributes because he needs extra slaves, he needs extra resources to build this super pyramid. He gets tributes from all these places, and one of the places is Cyprus, and they read out what they want from Cyprus, the tonnage of grain, etc. And Joan Collins, who's busy kind of adjusting her makeup, comes forward and says, I'm the replacement for the grain. You can have me or you can have the grain, but you can't have both. And of course Jack Hawkins is like, I'll just take both. And she's like, oh, you can't have both. And she's very feisty. And she's caked with makeup. And obviously Jack Hawkins takes a liking to her because she's like full of vim and vigour and like stands up to him, so obviously he likes that kind of thing. So you have this, she also likes his captain of the guard, if you know what I mean. So you have this other strand, he already has a queen, he already has a son with the queen, but Joan Collins, when she sees his treasure trove, that's not a euphemism, literally his treasure trove, she obviously wants all this treasure for herself. So there's a whole plot where she can become the queen, and try and steal all his treasure. So you have these kind of two strands going on at the same time. They're not very balanced, and to be honest, it's more interesting the construction of the pyramid type stuff that goes on in the film, rather than the whole side plot with Joan Collins. But that really pays off at the end of the film. It's one of those rare kind of Egyptian epic that were made in the 50s and 60s where religion doesn't really come into it. It's not even discussed really. Yeah, there's a little bit about the Egyptian religion of, believing in the second life, believing that, as soon as you're buried, that's why you have to take all your belongings, because all those belongings will go to you in the second life. But it's excellent in the way it's not religion based. It's not really mentioned who the slaves are or where they're from, and because obviously with James Robertson Justice you would think they're from England somewhere. If you suspend your disbelief, it is a movie after all. There's a lot of pleasure to be had from Land of the Pharaohs. It's just such wonderful fun. One of the best characters is the Pharaoh's kind of right hand man, his lieutenant, because he has a lovely moment of kind of grace near the end of the film. It's just classic Sunday afternoon matinee enjoyment. Again, it has been kind of forgotten about and ignored just because it was such a failure. But I would think at some point maybe Kino Lorber or somebody like that should really release it on Blu-ray, because it really needs to be seen on a big screen, and in that blazing Technicolor. So let me know in the comments below if you've seen Land of the Pharaohs and what you think of it. Is it just too silly for you? And I'm just going to briefly go into a little bit of spoilers at the end of the film. So it's a great fun film. For me, it's one of the Hawks films that is just a pure joy, despite of its issues and flaws, and the fact it was a bomb. So I just wanted, as far as spoilers, just to talk about the ending of the film and how cool the actual mechanism of the pyramid when it closes is, and how great a scene it is. Joan Collins' character manages to kill the Queen by, which is a quite dark way of killing her, by teaching her son the flute, which attracts cobras, because as we all know, cobras just love that flute. And the Queen jumps on the cobra to save her son. So the Queen's out of the way, so Joan Collins becomes the Queen, but then she's still not going to get the treasure until Jack Hawkins is out of the way. So she gets the chief of the guards, who she's obviously been having sex with, to try and kill Jack Hawkins, which he dies of his wounds because they have a big battle. I even forgot to say there's a wonderful scene where Jack Hawkins fights a bull. It's obviously not quite Jack Hawkins, he's just there at the end wiggling some fake horns about. But there's a scene where Jack Hawkins fights a bull. I mean, how many films do you see that? So he's dead, so they all go down to the burial. But of course Joan Collins doesn't kind of realise that you get buried with the Pharaoh. So his right hand man, who has actually let James Robertson Justice and his son go rather than having them buried with it, because what difference does it make that they carry the secret? Because the secret is the pyramid seals with sand, so all the passageways close as the sand drains out of the pyramid. I mean, it's a beautiful, it's a wonderful little scheme and design. But Joan Collins thinks she's going to get his riches and she'll become queen and ruler of the land, but of course she doesn't actually realise she's getting buried with all the people that designed or helped build it in her sanctum, with all the treasure and all the gold. So she will get the treasure and the gold, but she'll be dead quite soon. And when that realisation, Joan Collins, when she actually realises she's going to get buried alive, it's just a wonderful moment. Again, I don't know whether that was part of why it wasn't successful. The fact that obviously the Pharaoh dies because he has to, because then we'll see the kind of how the pyramid works after he's dead. So he has to die, Joan Collins dies, the Queen dies, at least James Robertson Justice and his son doesn't die, they're released. But there's no kind of happy ending, there's no romantic happy ending. Everybody pretty much just dies, and James Robertson Justice and his people just walk off, and it's literally the end. But that moment of realisation by Joan Collins that yes, you'll have all the treasure, but you're going to asphyxiate quite soon, is quite wonderful. That's my kind of ending. So again, thanks very much for watching. If you've made it this far, let me know what you thought of Land of the Pharaohs. Is it fairly mistreated or unfairly mistreated? And hopefully join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.